שמה! אין לכם מה לעשות פה!
גומי, הם עומדים מאחורי קיר, הם מוציאים את הרובה כאילו עם יד אחת ויורים פשוט.
תברחו משם, אין לכם מה לעשות פה!
This is an open civilian area.
This is a village and a school.
Soldiers are not allowed here.
Images of little Palestinian boys and soldiers would blend into each other in my imagination. I would see David and Goliath, Leila Khaled hijacking planes, and the stones of the rebels that symbolize resistance for me. All these images came with me to Palestine, an endless guerrilla of images that became very real once in the Holy Land. I had to come to understand how the Palestinians were holding their own in the face of the fourth largest military and nuclear power in the world. A fateful date of our contemporary history, a date that doesn't even need to be indicated by its year. It's 9/11, simply for everybody. I was there that day, a few streets from the World Trade Center, when the first plane flew almost right above my head. It seemed so surreal, as if a film were being shot in Manhattan. After all, the wings of this huge plane weren't even touching the buildings it was flying by. It had to be a Hollywood movie. I decided to go to my friend's place since all the city's exits were blocked. I couldn't go back home to the country. Going up Broadway to go to my friend's, I saw thousands of people going down the avenue, an exodus. I called my dad in Tunisia, and before I could say anything, he screamed on the phone, "We have nothing to do with this." He was on the defensive, as if he had a premonition of what was coming up. I, on the other hand, was totally unconscious. I didn't know what to think. I still had this surreal impression of being part of a huge movie. I couldn't feel or grasp the scope, the extent of the event I was witnessing.
Join us! This is what your democracy really is.
The following days, the television set became all-pervading in my life and in the life of the people I knew in America. We had the face of the 22 hijackers, all Arabs. The word terrorists was continuously repeated. Afghanistan was going to pay the price, and the American Constitution was rewritten. In fact, Everything had changed due to terrorism.
Make it happen. Had to do it rapping, paying dues with trips from Palestine to Manhattan. While you acting, we demand direct action. It's civil.
I started demonstrating here and there against the war, but not more than that. We didn't dare much at the beginning. America was in mourning. But things were moving at a faster and faster rate in the name of the terrorist threat, to the extent that the right to resist foreign military occupation, American or otherwise, was being denied. This resistance was officially reclassified as terrorism. It is at this point that the rage started rising in me. It was as if the ruling classes here and across the world had united to take advantage of a single event, 9/11, in order to crush any legitimate resistance to their looting of other people's goods and land. I decided to go to Iraq and see with my own eyes what was really going on. Feel the oppression that they're living, record it on camera, and convey a very simple message. Simple, yet obscured by today's blatant propaganda. All people have the right to resist when faced with a war and an occupation that is imposed on them, whatever name is given to this war. In the meantime, I had sent my resume to volunteer for the International Women's Peace Service, a women's movement resisting non-violently on the ground in the occupied territories of Palestine.
The strangest thing I've ever seen.
Is that the result of conditioning, Mr. Brent?
How did you do that?
I was advised to go through one of the borders between Jordan and Israel, the southern one, due to my Arabic Muslim roots. Apparently, it was a more relaxed border. I waved goodbye to the guards at the Jordanian border, and with fear in my stomach, I walked towards the Israelis. It was in the beginning of June 2004. The border crossing was indeed very quiet. Too quiet, in fact. I was the only one crossing that morning, and I found myself surrounded by a few soldiers armed to the teeth, interrogating me on everything. One soldier asked me why I was sweating so much since the AC was just above my head. Fear does not only give wings, it can also be very creative in this sort of situation.
That's what we call conditioning.
A strip search followed, and then I had to go through passport control for another cross-examination.
Precious cargo. Cargo for whose safety and survival infinite pains are taken and millions of dollars spent.
But this time they played good cop, bad cop. My story didn't hold up. A mix of, I am walking in the footsteps of Jesus, to I'm on a spiritual quest. Fortunately for me, I had taken a reservation with the Franciscan sisters in Jerusalem. At last, they let me in and I entered Israel. Jerusalem. I was in Jerusalem. I had dreamt of this city that so many had fought for and over throughout history. I arrived on the west side of the city, on the Israeli side, and I ran to the old city, where Palestinians are still living, where so many historical events had taken place, and where I was to meet a contact to give me instructions on how to get in the occupied territories. I had to memorize the phone number of this contact, since we couldn't keep anything on us that would connect us to any form of activism, even pacifist. Some of my former colleagues would say, especially pacifist. I spent 24 hours in Jerusalem, just enough time to see a portion of the apartheid wall, soldiers everywhere, settlers in the old city, and feel a mix of submission and apathy among Palestinians in the old city, who seem to be waiting for Jerusalem to recover its past life and greatness.
People in the world who want to see peace in the Middle East, I strongly urge all of you to fight off terror, to cut off money to organizations such as Hamas, to isolate those who hate so much that they're willing to kill to stop peace from going forward. I strongly condemn the killings. And I urge and call upon all the free world, nations which love peace, to not only condemn the killings, but to use every ounce of their power to prevent them from happening in the future.
I think it is important that the leaders stay the course. What happened this morning is utterly reprehensible, but it should not deter the leaders from moving ahead. Obviously, we should deal very firmly with all these terrorist attacks.
I just felt, for me, a really important thing to come here and to verify what I was learning and to be a part of what people were doing here, to help, work against the occupation and work against the repression of Arabs and other minorities in this area. And so I did. So I came and joined with the ISM. They just, they were a natural fit for me. It was, their philosophies and their actions, in particular, the fact that they were, very much involved, very much directly on the ground, and doing things with the people, meeting with the people, immersing with the people, confronting the military, being in their places, documenting what they were doing. To me, was like, that's the essence of activism, to be playing a direct role in the political affairs of the world, because you are a part of it, no matter what you do. You're a part of the political process. I mean, if you're not an activist, you're still, you're buying Pepsi and, meat or beans at the grocery store, and, there are political ramifications of everything you do. So you can either be a part of changing it, or you can be a part of maintaining the status quo. And for us, the status quo is predominantly, violence, psychology or physicality. When I came here, I was very, there was nothing here that I saw that was not something that I had, read about or heard about. To me, it was like, it was basically just like a verification of all that I had heard and read and seen. It's like, you see a picture and then you step into the picture.
What does it really mean to be nonviolent? Could we defend ourselves if a soldier would attack us? The answer was negative, and the group sent me for a nonviolent training in Ramallah, organized by the activists of the International Solidarity Movement. During the nonviolent workshop, the first question we were asked: what did the word privilege mean for us? The Palestinian instructor explained to us that this question was the very basis upon which the movement was created. We had to become aware that we were going to confront a different treatment than the Palestinians due to our passport, witness abuse and oppression, and be spared from it since we have an American, British, French, or Swedish passport. The idea that had inspired the International Solidarity Movement was to encourage the presence of Western pacifists in the territories so that they could use their passport to alleviate the Israeli occupation system on the Palestinians. Thus, we had a privilege. A power was given to us, and we were asked to use it wisely and with the highest good in mind. I pondered this issue a lot, especially when I would see myself or other militants pretend to be so brave and selfless to the point of forgetting that we are not there for us, to prove anything to ourselves. We're there for them. From time to time, some of us would forget our purpose in Palestine, and whatever had motivated this situation, it triggered in our heads a process of objectification. In that, we would detach ourselves from the actual reality to the point of no longer seeing our neighbors, our Palestinian friends that would surround us. The Palestinian cause became our raison d'être, to end the occupation. Drink tea with Palestinians or buy toys for some of the village kids became minor, if not unproductive, since there was always too much political or media work to be done. We were too closely involved to stand back and see ourselves in the situation, especially in our group, as we had a permanent presence in Palestine. In short, we weren't just on the ground for a couple of weeks, but often for months on end, and we didn't stop.
No, we don't care who you are, what you want to do. You cannot do it. We have absolute power over you. We have very little value for your lives and very little value for your culture and for your humanity and your spirit. So we will, kick you aside and slap you around in any way we see fit. And it was just a very poignant reminder, the power dynamic. And so once they, continued the curfew, and then we just did our thing. As I said, we worked with the medical crews and tried to keep about what was going on. We visited families during the curfew and shared some time with them, and then soon enough the Israelis came and shot me.
There were endless demos to go to.
أصبحت دماءها لحبر برواية مهرجان الإمبريالية الأمريكية. بخرج عن نص بصرخة تؤمر بالحرية. أعطيني إياها. Where is the power? When to blame? Take to tower. You take, you lose. Between war and peace, you gotta choose. Acts of evil are survival. Don't break silence. Our gun is pain, not violence, not violence.
We had to retrace and record the memory of the elders, of those Palestinians who remembered the lands that disappeared, devastated and dispossessed by the settlers. Then, we had to write reports of human rights abuses, write to the media, bear witness as much as and as fast as possible, because the Palestinians, their houses and their lands were disappearing daily.
Soccer for the ladies with Germany in black and white uniforms playing home.
We would run left, right, and center between the villagers' calls who were harassed by the army in their own village, the calls from Palestinians trapped in checkpoints while trying to get home, and accompany the children to school to ensure that they would be able to study without getting attacked or stopped by the army.
They just can't seem to get into scoring position.
Yeah, sort of.
Show me ID.
I haven't got. You know, you're on film.
I could no longer see the light at the end of the tunnel. I could no longer see the end. I could no longer see anything.
They are making the people life like disaster. Just go in the dhuhr time. So they are looking the time the people they come from work, and they just standing, not doing. خلوش الناس تمرق في الوقت المناسب. اذا هم بس بدهم يفحصوا بسرعه ويخلوا الناس تمرق، بس لا، هم بيخلوا الناس واقفين فتره طويله في الشوب، اطفال، نساء، ناس كبار بالسن، بس just to feel happy. I know this is not the soldiers working. I know this is an ordering from upstairs, from people higher, because they are torturing people slowly, like killing people. بسموه الموت البطيء. تعرفي شو يعني انك تحسي حالك انت بتقدريش تسوي اشي، عاجزه انت. انا بدي اروح مشوار، لازم استنى فتره طويله، لازم يكون patient كتير inside me. From where can I get all this patience? Palestinians, they have a lot of patience, but with this patience it's a lot of anger.
אם אני נופל על מישהו שלא בן 40 ומעלה, הוא לא עובר היום. אח שלי, אל תיפול סתם, יש אנשים שנראים ותוציאו תעודות זהות שיהיו לכם ביד, יש אישורים.
עכשיו דוקטורים או מורים?
דוקטורים, מורים, תסריך.
They put those kids, those young Israeli army on the checkpoint to create on the opposite side, on the Palestinian side, a suicide bomber. And then they wake up one day and they said, why it's happened? Why those Palestinians blew up themselves in one of the restaurants somewhere in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, and we have 20, 30, 50, 10 victims, we have hundreds injured. They do not ask themselves that we have to go to the checkpoint and to see what those kids, those young army, they are doing there. Because he said to my brother, if you will not shut down your mouth, I will shoot you, son of a bitch. Then my brother said, it's not me, son of a bitch, it's you, son of a bitch, because I have nothing to do. I have an empty hands, I came back from my work, and I have the right to go back to see my family, my wife, my 2 kids. Their age is less than 6 years old, a boy and a girl. And this soldier, he pushed all the human rights, all the basic need of life for this man, he threw it against the wall. And he put the track of his gun and he shot only 1 bullet. A bullet which by this size, maybe it cost $1, maybe $2. Let us say $5, it doesn't matter, because this bullet caused a death for an innocent. Again, because he's a Palestinian. I'm not against that Israel should have its own army. The same with me as a Palestinian. When I got my own state, I would like to have my state to have the strongest army in the world. It's like the same in Swiss. They got the most strongest army in the world, but not to attack another country, not to occupy another country, and not to humiliate another nations.
I have more than 20 friends killed by Israeli. More than 20 arrested by Israeli. My mother, she lost 10 persons in her family in one day. The bulldozer destroyed the house and the people, that family inside the house. The grandfather and his son have a wife. The wife have daughters, and she was pregnant, and there's two sisters, you know. I can't wait in my home to like this. And I can't go to throw the stone to the tank. I can't go to bring a gun and start shoot the Israeli, because I don't have experience in this way.
I don't have to go to the violence, because there's very, very good, peaceful and very good ways. But when you say the soldier just throwing gases, through shooting people, when my friend, I was studying behind him, and he just was killed. I don't know what I have to do. So, but you know, this anger inside me makes me to throw these stones. But it's, you know, some kind of well, I don't have to do it, but I'm telling you, sometimes you can't control yourself. You can't stop. You can't stop and just watching. You know, I can't just shouting, stop the wall, stop the wall, stop the wall. You know, the words can't do anything. But I have to something to do to sue the soldier, to tell him that I'm not accepting what they're doing.
الجيش اجوا دمروا بيتي مش بحجة ترخيص. البيت هذا تبعي موجود هين شوكي في حلوقهم. هم يتحججوا قالوا انك معكش ترخيص وانا معي ترخيص، وابرزت لهم الترخيص. موجود الترخيص من قبل السلطة تبعتنا اللي هم جابوها هين واعترفوا فيها. وانا رحت على بيت إيل وجلست معهم وقلت لهم انكم امتى انطيتوني ترخيص؟ اثبتوا للجانب الاسرائيلي انكم في منطقة بي. قالوا للجانب الاسرائيلي انتم انطيتونا الاوراق هذه والخوارط، وقلت لنا هاي منطقة بي. احد المسؤولين الفلسطينيين بيقول له انتم اللي بدكم اياه منطقة بي بتقولوا عنه منطقة بي، واللي بدكمش اياه منطقة بي بتقولوا عنه منطقة سي، وانتم منطينا في خوارط. انا بيتي هذا بقوي 7 8 عائلات موجودين جوا البيت هذا، ليه ما كلوش الي اتبنيش هذا البيت من اول ما بلشت ابني؟ ليش خلوني تمني خلصت بنا واجوا هدوه؟ هذا هو العمل اللي بيقوموا به. بيقولوا انتم ارهابيين. ليش ارهابيين؟ احنا اصحاب الارض، هاي دورنا، هاي ارضنا، المستعمره هذه النا فيها 22 دلم. ليش هذا اليهودي اللي اجى من اوكرانيا واجى من روسيا ابصر من وين اجى صار له الحق انه يبني وصار معه رخصه ومعه ترخيص؟ اما انا بكتبوا لي في الرخصه لما يعطوني اياها بكتبوا لي غير مالك، يعني انت ما انتك صاحب حق في هذه الارض.
It is in the village of Azawiya that I was overcome with this doubt buried inside of me for some time. I doubted the effectiveness of nonviolence, of confining oneself into one form of resistance while facing an occupation that is everywhere all at once.
الأرضية
حبني خي الصغير حبني بابا حبني خي الصغير
منك يا شارون ربنا ينتقم من شارون وجيشه يا الله والبوش اللي بيدعم فيه يا الله ريت ايديهم ينشلين على الاتهم يا الله الله يدمر جيش شارون وشارون بجاه النبي واهل بيته الله يدمره مثل ما دمرت روسيا امريكا تتدمر جاه الله زلزال وين شارون في 5 دقائق تيجي تخلعها شوف هذا شوف الزيتون شوف ذروت شوف لا هو شران بيعمل هيك مشان يرحلنا لا بنرحلش عنده اللي تعبنا عليه عنده اللي تعبنا عليه راح جاب شارون من يهود من روسيا ومن اثيوبيا من المانيا وبيجيب بلملم فيهم الدول العالم وبحطهم في فلسطين وبده يرحل شعب فلسطين لا شعب فلسطين بيرحلش مثل الجذر في الارض.
When this woman stated that the roots of the olive trees and the Palestinians are one and the same, I finally understood what it is to resist for a Palestinian. The answer had always been there in front of my eyes, but the images in my head, in my imagination, prevented me from seeing anything else.
All my childhood, all the images of my childhood is Intifada images. You can still in my mind the prison when I went to visit my uncle, the fighters, all these things, all the small kids throwing stones, the demonstration, the first Intifada. So this is my childhood. When I joined the university in 2000, the second Intifada started at that time. So either my childhood or when I'm young, the same, it is the same, like it is in my blood. Can you understand this? Everything is Intifada.
More than once, I sat among Palestinians in their homes, receiving their hospitality in the midst of the grenades going off right outside or bullets being fired all over the place. They would feed me and protect me, and I was grateful, but at the same time I couldn't wait to return to the action that I would hear outside. It never once occurred to me to film them in their homes, continuing their life as best as possible. In the context of the Palestinian struggle, how do we resist an occupation that has infiltrated every aspect of their daily life? And in your opinion as well, what form should this resistance take? Violent, non-violent, within the context?
Well, first of all, I don't presume to give advice to people who are struggling against violent and brutal repression and military occupation. However, I do have opinions about the matter for what they're worth, and I've been writing about them and speaking about them for about 40 years, so I'll just repeat it. The only serious mode of resistance, and the one that would be likely to work, would be mass popular nonviolent resistance. Ekbal's proposal years ago to the PLO, back probably in the 1970, was that they try to organize something analogous to the mass salt march in India, some mass popular nonviolent march, which of course would be met by violence that you expect, to simply retake the territories and refuse any cooperation or participation with the occupying authorities. Frankly, I think that was a good idea. It was never taken. The methods that were pursued were almost a gift to the most hawkish elements in Israel and the United States. I mean, they love violence. That they can deal with. It's pretty much as like in Iraq today, if you want to take an example. I mean, the U.S. doesn't mind the car bombs and the suicide bombs and so on. They have overwhelming resources of violence, and they can crush any violence that they face. What they cannot deal with is the mass popular nonviolent resistance, which in fact has just won pretty remarkable victories. It's compelled the United States and Britain to accept elections, which they fought bitterly to prevent. But it means that it's an encouraging sign. It means that popular organizing in the United States could succeed if it is not alienated by permitting the extraordinarily effective Western and Israeli propaganda systems to distort it into, just the crazed suicide bombers who want to kill all the Jews, or people who want to bomb, development towns on the borders with rockets. If that's the image that's projected, well, the propaganda system will, of course, amplify it. That's their job, after all, is to amplify and distort and deceive. But you don't try to give them opportunities. Rather, struggle against them by the means that are available, which are mostly nonviolence. And it is not easy. I mean, there has been plenty of nonviolent resistance in the territories, and it just gets smashed by force. I mean, I've witnessed it myself. But yes, that's the nature of nonviolent resistance. Up to a point, it can be smashed by force. Beyond a certain point, those who hold the guns are going to collapse under the effort, and because they come from, and the population that backs them won't back it anymore. That's happened over and over again in history. The Palestinian leadership, and sometimes on the ground, has preferred a course which is guaranteed to alienate the population. I mean, when Arafat showed up in the 1970s, let's say, with a Kalashnikov and making speeches about, part of the revolutionary movement of the world, which is going to, carry out a, Marxist revolution. Probably didn't understand the words. Of course, that's going to alienate people. If the Palestinian leadership had come and told the truth, they would have had enormous support. The truth is they're conservative nationalists who don't understand what Marxism is and don't care about it. They want to be able to elect their own mayors and run their own affairs. I mean, they have 95% of the population supporting them. But they didn't do that. They insisted on posturing as revolutionaries who are going to, fight their way to victory by violence. I mean, people like, the American and Israeli hawks should have been paying them to do that. That's exactly what they wanted. And that goes on consistently. I mean, for example, back in the early 70s when the PLO was carrying out a lot of terrorist actions, fortunately reduced later. But I mean, they were doing things that were just guaranteed to cause them the worst possible problems in Israel. For example, one of the tactics that Israel used in dealing with the Mizrahim, sort of Arab Jews, that came in, was to disperse. I mean, they're a very oppressed population, and they often dispersed them to the boundaries in what were called development towns. Anyone who read Orwell knows what a development town is. But they're stuck on the border where there's poverty-stricken areas, and those are that's what the PLO attacked. I mean, they were attacking poor Jews from Arab countries who were pushed to the border, to be targets of attack, for example. And that's who they attacked. I mean, you can't imagine anything politically more outlandish. I mean, these are some of their potential allies, and it went on and on like that. I could give you case after case.
Most of the people, boys and girls, they don't care with groups they are working in the first, because we are not really educated in these, these groups. We know this group is working against occupation, so we just choose any group it's close to us.
Nous avons dû adopter un discours de libération, qui est sorti chez eux. On n'insistait pas trop sur disons, la différence comme sur le plan de notre culture arabo-islamique, on l'affichait chez nous, etc. Mais enfin, c'était les droits de l'homme, c'était quand on veut faire comprendre une cause, il faut adopter un peu le langage de celui qui comprend. Moi, je ne sais pas si on sera palestinien. On fait ce travail, je pense que là, ouais.
As pacifists, we would arrive in Palestine with images of Gandhi or Martin Luther King, and we wouldn't shift from them. Our body embodied our weapon. Our body was on the line daily.
I don't want to be a scaredy cat all my life.
That's right. You want to grow into a mature, balanced person. That's a matter of conditioning, too. Condition yourselves to make more mature responses. Now, let's review a bit. We have certain basic emotions which are controlled subconsciously. They are modified and changed by a process called conditioning. Now, by understanding conditioning and using it, we can more easily achieve emotional maturity.
It's in Jerusalem, in an Arab quarter, during what was my first demo in an urban setting, that I started to question the merits of these peaceful demos. Too often, they ended sadly, and the victims were always Palestinians.
I don't think it's tear gas. It looks like tear gas, but it's not.
One of our friends get shot in a demonstration, and in this demonstration it was totally shocking because it was the first demonstration in the city, and it was in the city center, and there were no soldiers around the whole city, but they were shooting from the military points, which is on the mountain, and from the Apache. And when he got shot, Zakaria ran to him because, first of all, it's medical team, and then it's his own friend. And he was holding him between his hands, and then we just found Zakaria flipped on the floor as well. I'm sorry. And then the medical team went to both of them and hauled them to the hospital. Zakaria was killed right on the spot because the shot was in his head, and Jihad was killed as well, and they were like the first murderers in the city who was killed in the downtown without having a soldier around. And that was in the very beginning days of the Intifada, of this certain Intifada. So I think about him all the time because he was just going to help his friend and to save his life, and just he got shot. And that happened a lot with medical relief, that they get killed because they're trying to save other souls.
Pendant des siècles, juifs et musulmans cohabitèrent. Double intifada et une putain de guerre. Des frères dans le malheur, au milieu d'une riche civilisation prospère. Tout cela est voulu, mec, c'est de l'arbitraire. Faut cesser les massacres, beaucoup succombèrent. Au bal des assassins de nos mères se repèrent. Mourant dans les bras de papa, sous le regard figé caché des caméras. Au milieu de ces balles et de ces soldats, sans pitié il succomba dans ses bras. Jérusalem nous reviendra, Inch'Allah on fêtera ensemble la reconquista. Des pierres lancées à longueur de bras, des balles tirées sur n'importe qui pour n'importe quoi. Pour la terre sainte, une guerre sainte, c'est minable. Colons et intégrés sans distinction de confession. Balle contre caillou n'est pas la tradition. Palestine et Israël doivent donner l'exemple aux populations. Mais entre frères, aucune organisation. Israël, enfant gâté de l'Amérique. Palestine, orphelin maltraité de l'Amérique. Tout cela ne sort pas des fonds bibliques, mais d'une tête et d'une autocritique. Des images de mort diffusées sans verset coranique. Et dans le conflit, je m'implique avec mes répliques d'un simple pacifiste.
إذا شمت ريحة الغاز ثاني مرة ترقدوا لهنا.
ماما أنا جميت طلعت بسرعة.
جيت بسرعة حبيبي. طيب
خلك جنبي.
طيب يا عمتي طيب. خذوا معكم بصل. This is our weapon. The basal, the onion for the gas, because they just throw gas. They come to Ramallah. We don't have any demonstration, as you see. We don't have anything. The kids, they are playing down, internet plays, and they just come and throw gas, just to make people angry.
In the airport, they were searching, just it's something, yani, they don't search very much, because I had in my Samsonite bag, a small, yani, it's a handbag, I had the explosives, and over them I have put some yani, makeup and the accessoire and so on. So I opened it, and the man said, okay, on the counter, and left. I had a pistol on my waist and a hand grenade in my purse, and it wasn't searched. We knew beforehand that there were no searching. Of course, there were no instruments like this now for passengers to be searched. And we waited there, and they said that there is some delay. So we waited. And then they called us to go. It was by bus. There were no tunnels at that time. When I was going to go out, I saw a girl standing near the door, and she had written a T-shirt, written here, "Be friends." You know, I just looked at her as if I wanted to tell her, we want to be friends, but now I cannot speak to you. And I really, it was, to me, it was something, you know, I don't know how to say it, but I wanted to tell her, look, we are obliged to do that. We don't like to do it, but we are obliged to. But of course, then I left and went to the bus. In the bus, there was a man came after me, and he sat beside me. Then I asked him, where are you from? And he said, I'm Greek, living in Chicago, and I'm coming to Athens to see my mother. Oh, goodness, I said. And he said, I was away 15 years ago. And I said, oh my God, now he is coming to see his mother, and now we are going to hijack that plane. But at that moment, I remembered my father waiting for his mother in Jerusalem in 1963. He had a permission to come at Mandelbaum Gate to meet her. But he waited 3 days and he didn't see his mother because the Israelis did not tell her that she had the permission. He got the permission, but she was not told, so she didn't come. And he waited for 3 days and 3 nights waiting for his mother, and he didn't see her. We stood up and we said in a very loud voice to the people in the first class, because we were in the first class, me and my friend, my colleague Salim, that nobody moves. He had a pistol, I had a hand grenade. I didn't take the pistol out, and we ran directly to the cockpit. It was, the hostess opened the door, so we ran directly because it's in front of us. Now you listen to the new captain. And the captain was just looking like that with the co-pilot and the engineer. I entered, I showed him the hand grenade. I told him, do you know what is this? He said, yes, this is a hand grenade. I pulled the pin and I told him, look, now have this as a souvenir. It was for 3.5 hours. We were speaking, I was speaking to the passengers, telling them who we were and why we were doing that and so on. And then the co-pilot, the pilot said, we cannot land, all the runways are blocked with tanks and cars and so on. I said, okay, just turn because I want to visit my country. He had his eyes and the other eyes of the co-pilot were just turning with my hand. He said, please take care, you're having a hand. I said, I know, but he said, put it on my shoulder, it's better for you to, So I was sending a message to our people and to the prisoners and so on. And then I told him, go, we want to visit Haifa now. And then he was flying over Haifa, and we were just looking, Salim and I, over. I remembered my father, that he wanted to see his mother and he couldn't. Then we went through.
This was your first time?
Yes.
Since 1948?
Yes, that was the first time I see Palestine. It was for me a turning point in my life. I felt as if I had taken my cause by my hands. At the same time, it was very well known that the Palestinians are struggling by all means, even by hijacking planes. Although it was not a strategic way of resisting, it was tactics. But at the same time, I felt that I have given from myself to those who are in jail suffering from torture, that nobody heard of them. I had to be their voice. So it gave me confidence in myself. And at the same time, all the time, on the plane, I was just remembering the way of life that we were leading. Very miserable life, very miserable childhood. Not only myself, also all Palestinian refugees. And it was something showing love to your people, showing love and commitment to your cause, to your land. It was the first time that I saw Palestine after 1948. It it was something, for me, I never dreamt of it. And I felt that my dreams are coming true now, that I'm involved in the struggle, and my people is revolting. This will make the distance to liberty, to freedom, to restoring the land nearer. All these ideas were coming to my mind when I was on the plane, that we can do something to make the world listen to us. We were screaming from our tents. Nobody heard us. Those who were in prison were screaming from torture. Nobody heard them. But when we used this tactic, all the world was attracted to hear, who are they? Who are those people? Why are they doing that? And we intended to put these questions in front of the world. Who played a role in giving Israel the chance to be built on our ruins.
We would support them and encourage them to lead their own demos and rallies. But the course of action, rather the method, was ours. We would find them disorganized. Nevertheless, they had organized themselves on their own more than once to protest the expropriation of their lands under the British Mandate in 1936 or under the Israeli occupation in 1987. In both cases, their uprising, the Intifada, took the shape of a general strike.
It's kind of like the first Intifada, which, Israel had complete coverage of the territories. They didn't know what was happening. They hadn't a clue. I was there at the time. They couldn't even figure out how the messages were being distributed. It didn't take a genius to figure it out. Just sitting there, I could see 10-year-old kids jumping from one roof to another with a piece of paper or something. But they were never able to figure out what was going on. And the only way they could stop it was by, throwing, most of the educated class into jail, and finally, and breaking bones. And,
And then again, how does one organize a demo or a rally when all villages and towns are fragmented into ghettos? The only real roads in Palestine are forbidden to Palestinians. They are built for the settlers. They do not have checkpoints, and it is on these roads that one realizes how the occupation creates an illusion of long distances. After all, Tel Aviv was only 30 kilometers from our village, but a universe separated us. We lived in a tiny Palestinian village, 2 kilometers from Ariel, the biggest settlement in the West Bank with about 30,000 settlers. Ariel, as other settlements, is built on top of hills, overlooking the Palestinian communities. In the evening, we would watch Ariel from our terrace with all its lights reminiscent of fireworks, in contrast to the obscurity which prevailed in the Palestinian villages.
In this situation, as you know, it's the mass popular support, it's very hard to get them together.
That's
just
right.
like that, to get 100.
That was the point of cantonizing the population. People with power are going to use it. So, before, there's better than I do, but before, at the time of the Camp David negotiations, the West Bank was broken up actually into over 200 separated cantons, some of them a few square kilometers. And you could technically get from one to another, but anyone who's tried to do it knows what that means. In fact, just to get from Bethlehem to Ramallah on what's called a Palestinian road officially, you know, if it's not raining, you might make it with luck without falling into a wadi, you know. But it's not like traveling on one of the Israeli superhighways. It'll get you there in 5 minutes. Yeah, the place was purposely broken up for that purpose. That's the goal of the infrastructure developments that the U.S. is funding. But the U.S. population is against it. And the Israeli population is very split about it. I mean, and that's the lever that has to be used to overcome it. You can't overcome it by giving them what they want, namely violent resistance. That's what they want. You know, they'll love that. They're obviously going to be able to crush that. And it gives an opportunity to do more and more of this. The other is very painful, very difficult, especially when there's no, when you're not getting popular support from the occupying country, but that's the one thing that has to be pressed. And it does happen. I mean, the women who come to the checkpoints, the Tayyush, Mahsoum, Tayyush, others are significant and could be extended. And it could grow here. You know, it could be a powerful movement here, which would compel the U.S. government simply to do what the majority of the large majority of the population wants. But it's going to, it takes that kind of interaction. The basic interaction that can lead to success in a colonial struggle is mass, popular, nonviolent resistance on the ground and popular support in the oppressor society. And they interact, you know, they reinforce one another. It's easy to say, you know, when you're rich and privileged, and pretty hard to do when you're under the boot, but there just isn't any other way.
I would often debate with other activists in my group over our nonviolent ideology that had been reflected upon and framed in the West, not within the Palestinian context. It is true that our presence and our testimonies were useful, but was our vision, our philosophy truly grounded in the Palestinians' reality?
Nous ne sommes pas une organisation politique, nous ne sommes pas un parti, nous sommes un groupe de citoyens belges solidaires du peuple palestinien. Nous sommes venus, comme tous les internationaux, dans des missions, il y a 2 ans d'ici, pour voir et comprendre ce qui se passait chez vous. Alors notre envie principale, c'est que les habitants de Qalqilia restent à Qalqilia, ne quittent pas Qalqilia, et résiste par tous les moyens au plan du gouvernement israélien qui est de les chasser et de prendre possession de leurs terres.
It was the first time I heard a European activist publicly encourage resistance by all means. And I must admit, it made me feel good. I felt very isolated among the international activists, as I believed less and less in our commitment to nonviolence. It no longer seemed to push forward the Palestinians' cause.
The martyrs are Noha Sabri Sweden, 33 years old, pregnant in the 9th month. Tariq Aqil, 13. Mohammed Al-Babli, 22. Walid Abdel Karim Al-Khatib, 24. Fadi Al-Hawajri, Mu'tasim Al-Khalil Aqil, Maher Khamis Al-Rifa'i, 24. And Rami Awad. The martyrs were killed in the Israeli assault against the Bridge refugee camps this dawn. The mourners denounced the Israeli daily ugly crimes committed by occupation forces against the Palestinian people. Meanwhile, Palestinian masses in Khan Yunis city sent today the body of the child Abdurrahman Jadallah, 6 years old, who was killed yesterday by an Israeli bullet in the head during the funeral of the martyrs Muhammad Abdul Hadi and Abdurrabul Assar. In Rafah city, Palestinian masses sent today the body of martyr Aziza Deb al-Qsair, 50 years old, who was killed yesterday evening due to wounds she sustained last October during blowing up her son's house by the Israeli forces. And about yesterday's incursion into the Bridge refugee camp, here's the following report.
Ten members of the Maqadma family were lying in hospital today following a deadly Israeli raid into the Bridge refugee camp, during which their pregnant mother was killed. Nuha Sweden al-Maqadma, 33 years old, was killed by falling rubble when Israeli soldiers blew up her home. She was 9 months pregnant, doctors at the hospital in the nearby Deir al-Balah said. We were expecting the baby tonight, Shukri al-Maqadma, 40 years old, said from the hospital, where 9 of his 10 children are also recovering. The ambulances could not reach us because of the shelling, as well as firing from tanks and helicopters that went on for 6 hours. Osama Damo, PBC Television.
And the Palestinians in all of this, were they helping their cause?
تعرف ليش اخترتي للحزب جهاد إسلامي؟ في كثير من الأحزاب، ليش يعني هذا الحزب؟
نعم، أنا بالفترة اللي قررت إن أخوض العمل العسكري كنت الحمد لله يعني ملتزمة بالإسلام. طبعا في هذه الفترة ما كانش في حركة إسلامية تعمل عسكريا. في كانت حركة الإخوان المسلمين، لكن أكثر يعني عمل اجتماعي يعني ودعوي. أنا كنت أمشي على صعيد الدعوة كنت يعني أمشي مع بنات هاي الحركة مع الإخوان المسلمين على صعيد الدعوة والشيء، لكن هذا ما كان يعني في لي أهداف أكبر كان وما كانت تلبي طموحاتي يعني. ففي هاي الفترة كان يعني ظهر يعني طبعا في يعني أنا تدربت في البداية في معسكرات فتح يعني كيف، لكن ما كان عندي اعتناق للفكرة العلمانية اللي بيطرحوها فتح. فطبعا في هاي الفترة كان في عم بتشكل تنظيم اسمه سرايا الجهاد الإسلامي، هو مجموعة للحركات الإسلامية المجاهدة، تنظيمات صغيرة ولكن تسعى إلى العمل الجهادي ومقاومة الاحتلال.
Society service, but we decided to work more and more, and since 3 years I can tell you that we didn't stop working days and nights, just because there is many people sacrifice their lives to help this country, and I think this is the least that we can do. Many of my friends, especially the international one, who's coming from Europe and America, ask me, but this is crazy, you're insane, you don't sleep, you don't have private life. And the answer is very simple, that when we get rid of this occupation, we have to have normal life, just like any other people in the world. But at the moment, we have to work and resist. And my resistance is very simple. My resistance is just helping my people, helping the children. putting a smile on their faces.
Un premier espace qui est une rue. La rue appelée symboliquement la rue des frondeurs, hein, à cause du terme frondeur, hein, qui veut dire opposant. Là, on entend donc une manifestation. Il s'agit de jeunes qui sont des étudiants ou des lycéens et qui sont en train de manifester contre l'arrestation de plusieurs de leurs camarades. Première forme de résistance, en quelque sorte, une forme spontanée qui est d'aller dans la rue et de crier son opposition au maréchal Pétain.
هلا في كثير من المتطوعين الاجانب الدوليين اللي بيجوا عندنا على نابلس بتسالوا ليش الاطفال بيرموا حجار على السيارات الاسرائيليه، على سيارات العدو الاسرائيلي. وبيستغرب انه الحجر ما بيعمل شيء للدوريه الاسرائيليه. بالعكس بكون يمكن اليهود الجيش الاسرائيلي قاعد جوا الدوريه عم بيضحك على الاطفال. بس بشبه الوضع احنا كوضع الاطفال هذول بوضع الطفل الصغير. الطفل الصغير لما بيشعر في الم بكون مريض، ما بيقدرش يحكي لوالدته او لابوه انه مريض. فالتعبير الوحيد له انه بكون يبكي. فبصير الطفل بكون جيعان بتلاقيه بيبكي، لما بده بكون مريض بتلاقيه بيبكي، بس ما بيعرف يحكي شو ماله، يساعد خلي الناس تساعده شو ماله. فبشبه الطفل هذا بالاطفال الفلسطينيين هون، انه الطفل الفلسطيني مش عم لاقي حد يهتم فيه. في مؤسسات كثير وفي بس مش عم يشتغلوا بالطريقه الصحيحه. ما فيش الدعم الكافي، حتى لو في مؤسسات ما فيش لهم دعم كافي انهم يكملوا عملهم على اكمل وجه. فبتلاقي الاطفال انه ابوه استشهد، صاحبه استشهد، واحد كان ماشي معه بالشارع اجته رصاصه استشهد. الجيش اخذ انولد لما صار عمره 6 سنين الجيش اخذ ابوه، وهلا عمره 20 سنه بيعرفش ابوه، بس بيسمع صوت ابوه عن طريق التليفون او بيشوف صور ابوه انه معتقل داخل السجن الاسرائيلي. فالاطفال هدول الشباب بعض الاحيان ما فيش في ايدهم وسيله يعبروا عن رفضهم للواقع اللي هن عايشين فيه. فبعض الاحيان كثير من الاحيان بيتخذوا وسيله التعبير عن رفضهم للواقع هذا رمي الحجاره على الدوريات الاسرائيليه، عشان يعرفوا انه انت وجودك هون مرفوض. انا ما فيش عندي سلاح اجي اقاومك فيه، ما فيش في ايدي شيء اقدر اقاومك فيه. التعليم عندي انه انا اتعلم عشان اقاومك عن طريق التعليم. في عندنا قدرات وفي عندنا عقليات مذهله انه تقدر تعمل شيء، بس للاسف ما فيش عندها مساحه كيف تتحرك، سواء وضعها العائلي او سواء انه ما فيش معها مصاري تكمل دراستها. فهذا الاحيان بتاخذ وسيله رمي الحجار على الدوريات انه كوسيله لرفض، انه انا برفض وجودك هون، برفض الحياه اللي انا عايشها، برفض انت عمالك بدك تخليني اعيش بذل.
She's from Tulkarem refugee camp. She moved last year from Palestine because of her marriage, but she never missed a jeep in her street without throwing stones, sometimes vegetables, trash. I mean, it's just a way of saying, guys, you're not welcome in my street. Get out.
قضيت 2.5 سنين داخل المعتقل الإسرائيلي، 1.5 سنة بالرملة، نقلونا على التليمون، قعدت 4 شهور ونص، بعدين بعد ال4 شهور ونص بتاريخ 13/6/2004 رجعونا على الرملة، مش الكل، 50 أخت و50 ضل هلا عندنا 108 أسيرات، 8 أخوات في مراكز التوقيف، في 50 أسيرة بسجن التليمون مع طفل صغير وعمره 10 شهور اسمه نور غانم، وهو يعاني من مرض الافتراق في بقع بطنه بحاجة لعملية وإعداد السجن رافضة. وانا في 50 اخت في سجن الرمله، ومعنا طفل صغير، الطفل وائل طه عمره 1.5 سنة. انا عشت مع والدته من بدايه الاعتقال. انا لما كنت بالجانب طلعونا على السجن بعد اسبوع اجت والدته عندي وكانت حامل بوائل شهر واحد، فلما نقلت ب3/7 على الرمله هي اجت ب10/7 وكانت معي بالغرفه. تركته حسب القانون الاسرائيلي انه اي طفل فلسطيني، اي طفل داخل سجون الاحتلال، انه بس فترة وجوده في السجن لمدة 2 سنين، بعد 2 سنين وائل يسحب من امه. انا يمكن صرت وائل معي، هذا وائل هو عمره 1.5 سنة بالضبط، وهي والدته مربط طه، ووالدته داخل معتقل التليمون، هي داخل المعتقل الصورة داخل معتقل التليمون. فهي تصورها انه اخر مره شفت فيها وائل هو من عيونه وجهت صرخته بحكي لي احكيها للعالم برا. انا صار لي 1.5 سنة بالسجن، ضايلي 6 شهور بيسحبوني من امي. اي
أي إنسان بحب وائل يعيش زي أي طفل بقى يروح لي أمي معي. هاي هي صرخة وائل لكل إنسان أو لكل ضمير بيعرف الإنسانية. وائل الصبح لما يصحى إما بتكون نايمة على التخت بينام عليها أو بحط خده على خدها، بلف إيديه بهاي الطريقة على ركبة أمه أكثر من نص ساعة أو ساعة كاملة وهو نايم على أمه وبنادي عليها بهاي الطريقة. يعني يمكن أي طفل بناديها بس هو بنادي على أمه بهاي الطريقة يما.
One time, surrounded as I was by these great olive trees, now fallen, some had been planted more than 2,000 years ago. I forgot myself completely, and I told them straight to their face, "Wain Allah? Where's Allah?" Fortunately for me, there were only women around, Palestinian peasants. My audacity, what's more my irreverence as a Muslim, worried them first. Suddenly, they stopped speaking, and they surrounded me in this field of uprooted olive trees. We sat there on the land together, quietly, honoring the last breath of life of the trees. There were no emergency exits. They were all sealed. The rest of the world seemed to expect a Zen or Buddhist attitude on the part of the Palestinians facing their death, and the Palestinians appeared resigned to collapse with their land. How far do I need to go back in history to find someone who distinguishes publicly resistance from terrorism?
L'établissement entre les deux guerres mondiales, car il faut en remonter jusque-là, l'établissement d'un foyer sioniste en Palestine, et puis après la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, l'établissement d'un État d'Israël, soulevait à l'époque un certain nombre d'appréhensions. On pouvait se demander, en effet, et on se demandait même chez beaucoup de Juifs, si l'implantation de cette communauté sur des terres qui avaient été acquises dans des conditions plus ou moins justifiables et au milieu des peuples arabes qui lui sont foncièrement hostiles, n'allait pas entraîner d'incessants, d'interminables frictions et conflits. De sorte que, tout compris, on pouvait imaginer qu'un jour viendrait où notre pays pourrait aider directement à ce qu'une paix réelle fût conclue et garantie en Orient, pourvu qu'aucun drame nouveau ne vint à le déchirer. On sait que la voix de la France n'a pas été entendue. Israël ayant attaqué, s'est emparé en 6 jours de combat des objectifs qu'il voulait atteindre. Maintenant, il organise sur les territoires qu'il a pris l'occupation qui ne peut aller sans oppression, répression, expulsion. Et il s'y manifeste contre lui la résistance, qu'à son tour, il qualifie de terrorisme.
Moi, je suis devenu ce que je suis maintenant à l'âge de 15 ans. Parce que mon professeur, qui était par ailleurs un grand professeur, je suis allé dans un lycée à Tlemcen, je suis de Marniane, je suis d'un petit village à 50 km. Mon professeur, qui était lui un adventiste, c'est-à-dire un intégriste chrétien, sans que, parce que chaque fois il nous servait quelque chose qui nous touchait dans notre culture. Un jour, je lui avais dit, parce qu'il exagérait, je lui ai dit, écoutez, ne nous parlez pas toujours de choses qui s'attaquent à nos croyances sacrées. Et il m'a dit, Mohammed est un imposteur. On a fait ça. Je suis devenu Mbella par ce mot. J'ai adhéré au PPA, j'avais 15 ans, 16 ans. Tout de suite au PPA qui demandait l'indépendance de l'Algérie, etc. C'est-à-dire au moment de Hajj Messavi. Et puis j'ai milité dans ça. Et puis à un moment donné, j'ai dû quitter aussi. Je me salis parce que moi, je pensais qu'il fallait prendre des armes. Voilà. Et lui ne voulait pas, et je ne suis pas le seul. Il y avait un tas de jeunes, un organisme, l'organisation secrète, etc., qui ne voyaient que ça, ne voyaient pas une autre solution. Et donc on a passé outre, on a fait, et on a gagné. On a gagné, voilà. Mais on a gagné une petite bataille.
Here, come over here and take a look at this model of the brain.
How come today we don't hear straightforward statements similar to de Gaulle's or Ben Bella's? How did we fall headfirst into this reversal of the language, of the word?
The framework is resistance has to cease. Not a word about the core issues of settlement, occupation, expansion, which just goes on. In fact, they announced it right away, the wall, and so on and so forth. Oh, that's a tremendous victory for the U.S. and Israel. Actually, it's a much deeper victory, much deeper, and it's not discussed, but you can bring it up to the public. The Reagan administration declared a war on terror when it came in 1981. That's been suppressed. The reason is because it immediately turned into a vicious and brutal and murderous terrorist war, and nobody wants to talk about that. So that's kind of, we forget it. But they did. There was great pressure to, fight the plague of the modern age and so on and so forth. Under pressure, the UN in December 1987, General Assembly, passed its strongest resolution condemning terror ever. Called on all states to, cooperate to crush the plague of terrorism, everything you like. It passed almost unanimously. One country abstained, Honduras. Two countries voted against it, the United States and Israel. Now, why would they vote against the strongest condemnation of terror? Well, there's good reason, and they explained it. One paragraph said, nothing in this resolution infringes on the right of people to resist, in accord with the Charter of the United Nations, to resist foreign military occupation and racist and colonialist regimes. The Abbas-Sharon Agreement is the first one, which takes the U.S., which officially now takes the U.S.-Israeli stand in opposition to the rest of the world. The rest of the world has now gone along. There is no right of resistance to military occupation when it's the occupation by the chief mafia don and his clients. And Europe goes along with this. That's a fantastic victory for the U.S. and Israel. Now that's what an honest, independent press would have been reporting. Of course it can't, because it never reported the U.S.-Israeli blockage of the UN resolution. It can't report that, so nobody knows it.
And you can see how the son of Han has been waiting for the soldiers to open the gate. He came back from the land,
And the legitimate rage faced with what is going on here, on this planet, be it in Palestine or elsewhere, it's still our land. Where is this passion for life?
Moi qui me suis frotté aux problèmes sur le terrain, je ne crois pas à ces choses idéales. On se bat, on engoule. Où est la non-violence? Où est non. Et s'il faut prendre des armes, moi je prends les armes. J'ai 90 ans, je prends des armes. Si on me bloque, si je dois être un esclave, qui ne dit pas son nom, mais un esclave, eh bien voilà. Voilà. C'est pas que j'aime la guerre, franchement. J'aime la paix, j'aime la musique, j'aime bien, mais voilà, j'aime pas la nuit, quoi. Parce que je pense que c'est la plus grande insulte qu'on fait à quelqu'un qu'on assujettit, tantôt la partie. Les Juifs chez nous, ils auraient pu, s'ils étaient restés, ça serait très bien passé. La seule faute qu'ils ont commise, ils ont accepté la nationalité française qui a été fournie par le grand banquier Rothschild. Ouais. Et donc ils sont séparés de nous dans une affaire très, très grave. Et surtout, Israël ensuite a faussé le jeu parce que c'est venu presque en même temps. En 48, nous c'est 54, ça a commencé. Israël a pesé très lourd dans l'imaginaire juif. Et donc ils ont imposé le projet du colonialisme. Ils n'ont pas été avec nous. Voilà le grand. Donc ils ont marché avec le colonialisme. Israël a tout faussé.
The internationals weren't the only ones using their passport wisely. Many groups of Israeli activists worked relentlessly to support Palestinians under the occupation. They would often join us at demos and rallies, especially the Israeli Anarchist Against the Wall. The anarchists received a lot of media attention in Israel. When a soldier shot at the legs of one of them during an action in the occupied territories.
תשמע, ההפגנה הזאת הייתה פעולה ישירה, זה סוג של הפגנה שהיא ידועה בכל העולם, גם מרטין לותר קינג עשה את זה, גם גנדי עשה את זה, זה פעולות שהן נגד דברים, אבל הן לא נגד אנשים. אנחנו לא עמדנו לפגוע בחיילים, אנחנו אף פעם לא פוגעים בבני אדם, אין עלינו כלי נשק, אנחנו לא אלימים במובן של פגיעה בבני אדם. תשמע, זה הרעבת, זה הריגת אנשים. מה שאתה עושה פה זה אתה יוצר טרוריסטים. במקום לעצור טרוריסטים מלהגיע, אתה פשוט יוצר אותם. אסור לעשות את הגדר הזאת. לא במתכונת הנוכחית שלה, זה בטוח. זה פשוט, המקום הזה מסחה.
לא מפריע לך שבכל זאת מחבלים, נניח שגדרתי על סמוך לקו הירוק.
אנחנו היינו במסחה. הקמנו שם אוהל מחאה. ראינו, לוקחים 90% מהאדמות החקלאיות. היית נגיד אומר...
אני שואל אותך אם את לא רואה שום יסוד או צורך בגדר לנוכח ריבוי המחבלים הפלסטינים שמתפוצצים בישראל ורוצחים יהודים.
במתכונתה הביטחונית זו לא גדר ביטחונית, זו גדר פוליטית. היא נועדה להרעיב אנשים. היא פשוט יוצרת עוד טרוריסטים. אנחנו ראינו את זה, 90% מהאדמות החקלאיות של הכפר מסחה הן פשוט מוחרמות. הגדר הזאת, הפעולה שלנו, של הגדר, נועדה לפתוח את השער. השער שם היה נעול 3 חודשים. הבטיחו שהשער יהיה פתוח, השער היה סגור.
זה גטאות! זה גטאות! תסרבו! 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 תסרבו!
הם תכף יביאו! די! אל תראו!
אל תראו!
יש פה ילדים, אל תראו! אל תראו! אל תראו! אנחנו אזרחים! אתם תפגשו אותנו בבית! אתם תפגשו אותנו!
אל תראו!
אל תראו! אל תראו! אל תראו! אל תראו! אנחנו חיים איתכם! אל תראו!
אפשר כמה אנשים לפה? הכיבוש הוא טרור! הכיבוש הוא טרור!
די! השפיכו את הדמים המיותרת!
די לשפוך את הדמים! די!
כיצד מתיישבת טענת החיילים בדבר תחושה של סכנת חיים עם צהלות השמחה של המתנחלים שעמדו לצידם?
מה קרה? למה אחורה? יש פצוע. אחורה! רונן, יש פצוע! אחורה, אחורה! תקראו לאמבולנס מיד! תקראו לאמבולנס עכשיו! תביא אמבולנס! חתיכת בנות שונות! אתה הבנת מה עשית? תביא אמבולנס עכשיו! חתיכת כלבים! לכו הביתה! לכו הביתה! תתרבו! איננו רבק תתרבו פה!
זה הביטחון שלכם!
יורים בילדים, יא בני זונות!
סרטון למישהו נורא ליד הגדר הוא לגיטימי. יכול להיות שמזה אנחנו צריכים ללמוד שכזה סרטון וכזה תחקיר אנחנו צריכים לעשות על כל תקרית שקורית, ולא רק שנורא מישהו יהודי. למרות שאני חושבת שזה הכי טבעי בעולם. הגיע הזמן שהשמאל יגמור עם ההתחסדות שלו, אוקיי? אני אישית, ביום של הירי, מצאתי את עצמי עושה בלילה גרפיטי, וכשתפסה אותי המשטרה, זאת הייתה, לא הרגשתי שום פחד. ובראש ובראשונה לא הרגשתי פחד, כי הרגשתי שמה שאני עושה הוא ממש צודק, אוקיי? זאת אומרת שכל מערכת הערכים הזאת שבה זה שאני עושה גרפיטי, כשיורים במישהו כשהוא מוחה, זה אחד הדברים הכי נכונים שאני יכולה לעשות, ושאף שוטר לא ישכנע אותי אחרת. עכשיו, הזעם הזה שנולד אצלי, ושהוביל אותי לעשות גרפיטי, נולד כי נורא יהודי. הוא לא נולד כשנורא פלסטיני. ומי שהתכחש לזה הוא סופר צבוע.
One time, our neighbors called us for a case that was even weirder than usual. We walked towards the entrance of the village. There was a 4-story building covered in army camouflage that attracted a lot more attention than had it been left as it was. Palestinians lived on the first 2 floors. The women were busy with housework, and the children played outside. By the time we reached the 3rd floor, the absurdity of the situation became apparent.
They will shoot on us, throw stones, fire, and you will get.
They don't have the guns. You have the guns.
You will get harmed. They have the guns. Yes, pass this line, I will shoot. Anyone pass this line, I'm shooting. Okay.
Apparently, the soldiers were there for a 10-day training period, preparing themselves for a village full of Arabs, hiding terrorists. About 2 years ago, I read an article in the Washington Post that dealt with a new form of tourism, labeled Terrorism Tourism, and marketed by the organizers, settlers from Gush Etzion, a settlement next to the Palestinian town of Hebron. This adventure holiday package, costing more than $5,000, included going up in helicopters to fly over hot spots such as Hebron or Gaza, firing M16s and Uzis, training at the hands of experts from the Israeli occupation forces, and lunch at a Jewish settlement on the front line. This role-playing would last for about a week. Prior to my experience in Palestine, I had clear-cut ideas about the conflict. The percentage of lands expropriated by Israel mattered the most. I wanted to go back to the original borders before the establishment of Israel in 1948. One day, a Palestinian elder stopped me short in my monologue colored by Arab nationalism. Donia, It doesn't matter if it says Israel or Palestine on my passport. I want a passport. I want to be treated like a human being with my rights recognized as such. I want to live among my olive trees. I then started to understand reality in a different way, not from a political, historical, or religious perspective, but from a real, emotional, and physical point of view, one that is more just in the end.
أنا بحكي إنه الأرض إلنا وبدنا نجاهد عشان الأرض عشان ناخذ أرضنا، لا بدنا ياخذوها هم ولا بدنا تضلها إلنا، ما بدناش يتعدوا علينا، لأن الأرض أرضنا عايشين منها وبدنا نعيش يعني ما قدرتناش إلا هالحجر، هو مش إحنا بدفاعنا بالحجر، بندافع بالحجر، ما ندافعش بالقوة بالسلاح وبنقاوم، غصب عنا لما بدنا نشوفهم ياخذوا في الأرض والزيتون، غصب عنا نهود النسوان والبنات والرجال والجميع نهود عشان نقاوم، عشان ناخذ أرضنا إحنا عايشين منها، مش هم بدهم يجوا بس ياخذوها ويضربوا. احنا ما بنقبلش بنهود عشان بهود ابني مثلا جوزي الشاب الولد الاختيار بهود على الارض النسوان بالحكي بهجمن عشان احنا نرجع الاسلام والبلاد عشان ما يضربوش ما يصابوش بنحاول نحل المشكله وبدناش احنا نقطع سور الجدار بيننا وبينهم احنا بدنا شعب واحد.
في محسوم. ليش تستخدم كلمة بالعبرية؟ محسوم. احنا we are living with them so they will take from us some words we will take from them some words. احنا فيش مشكلة مع العبرية، مشكلة مع الناس اللي بتفكر بعقل الزيونست.
This land does not belong to people who want to destroy or appropriate it. It is not here to play some role in Zionist or Arab nationalist fantasies. This land is here to be honored, respected, and loved. This land is sacred because it is our earth. I left Palestine in September 2004, only to come back 1 year later.
Yeah, what do you think else I do? Do you think I hang around there?
No, I don't think I just ask you. It's my job.
I just answered his question. I just told him. I just answered the second time. I showed my passport and everything.
And ask you again.
Okay.
I can take you film. You know this.
So you can take my film. You can do whatever you want. Even though this is.
I do this because it's a law.
What is the law exactly?
I was to never put a foot in Palestine again. The Israeli Security Service stopped me as I tried to cross the Alembi border, the infamous bridge between Amman in Jordan and Jerusalem. I had prepared myself as best I could, knowing full well my militant past might harm me. A Jewish American friend of mine accompanied me. I used another passport, and I even wrote a pseudo-documentary synopsis on the Cohen gene, this lineage of Jewish priests initiated into the Kabbalah. I was not the only one to be fascinated by these mystical questions. Indeed, during both interrogations I underwent that day at Alembi, my interest for all that is spiritual seemed to fascinate the Israeli intelligence officer. I told him that I wanted to go back to Jordan. I no longer wanted to try to get in Israel, but they wouldn't let me go, claiming this was a simple security procedure. For more than 10 hours, until the closing of the border, all my personal belongings were searched and examined. In between 2 humiliating body searches, I had the opportunity to see one of their agents take each piece of paper and cards out of my purse. He arranged them meticulously in metal trays, which he then carried in another room, and the photocopy machine went off. In the meantime, another agent took a couple of pictures of me, and a young girl was assigned to follow my every move. I couldn't really grasp the rationale at this point. I was, after all, surrounded by security agents in a secured area and not allowed to move from my chair. Later on the day, when the tears started rolling down my cheeks, I understood her role. She tried to sympathize with me while opening her big, beautiful eyes innocently and assuring me she knew nothing of politics. But she did want to understand why, after everything I had been through, I didn't accept her superior's offer. The latter had proposed to consider letting me into Israel in exchange for information on my Palestinian and Arab contacts. I had nothing to tell them in any event, but they didn't believe me. I was at least happy that I had the premonition 2 months before in New York to change the tattoo I was going to get from Intifada in Arabic to Kundalini in Sanskrit. Already I had to take off my clothes 3 times. What would it have been like with the Intifada tattooed at the bottom of my back? I was finally let go and went to find my girlfriend who had received a visa to get in Israel, but she refused it. The first thing she threw at me, "Donia, I mean, what did you do? Even the Palestinians I was talking to in this hellish place couldn't believe the attention you received." I was not well to begin with, but when I heard this, I couldn't take it anymore, and I replied angrily, "You've known me for years intimately, and it never once crossed your mind that the problem could be with them and not with me?"
Plan for decades to destroy you, who await eagerly and passionately the sacred honor of dying to halt you.
Today in the Near East, a suffering people, the Palestine Arab refugees, are struggling for survival. 750,000 displaced human beings are dependent upon charity for their very existence. This is one of dozens of camps in which these refugees huddle in squalor.
Sabra, Shatila, 2 refugee camps that are one today. As all other refugee camps in Lebanon, their living conditions are unbearable.
كيف الحياة في المخيم شتيلة؟ يعني صعب؟
Sabra and Shatila had made the news in September 1982 when the Israeli army besieged the camps to block every possible exit. They then unleashed the Lebanese Christian Phalangist militias working for them. The massacre that followed lasted a few days.
Do you think you'll ever be able to have a normal life, or whatever is considered normal?
I won't have any normal life in the future because I'm completely stuck with the past. I always go back to the past, always. And a lot of people, they came to me and they wanted to guide me not to go back to the past, but I'm going back to the past. Always the past comes to me. I can't get rid of that. I'm addicted to the past. What should I do? I don't know. In 1982, during the Israeli invasion that was led by Ariel Sharon, the defense minister of Israel, nobody knew actually that the invasion will expand to reach Beirut. But Sharon had another plans, which is to invade Beirut and to expel the Palestinian freedom fighters from it. And during that time, we were exposed to a massacre. It was led by the Israeli army, who surrounded the camp and prevented anybody to get in or to get out from the camp. Even the cats, they were forbidden to go out. I still remember one cat we found it killed, and hens and a lot of animals. And they gave the green light to the Phalangists and the Lebanese forces and the Christian militiamen to enter our camp. They entered our camp. My father took us to another house, which is our relative's house. In that house, we were sitting together. He was hugging me. He was kissing me all the time. And he said, my mother, she said, let's go, let's escape, let's run away. My father told her that to be quiet, because you are a coward, don't do these mistakes. We cannot escape. During our road to the sports city, we started to see the doors are opened and the people were killed and stuff like this. And then in that time, and then we were taken and we were investigated by an Israeli officer. This Israeli officer, as I remember, he told us, what was your father wearing? What was your brother wearing? Did you see him with military suit? Have you seen guns in the camp? We said we couldn't answer, and they said, the woman said no, which it means that the Israelis were in full control of the incidents around the camp. And we went to a place, we have been told actually after investigating us by the Israelis to step on the landmines. But one of the Lebanese men, he stepped on one landmine and he exploded. And so we started to scream and said, we cannot go on, we cannot step on the explosives. So we kept our way, we continued our way towards the Hamra Street, where they opened a school for us. And we have been sitting in the school, Lebanese official school. It's named Ramla Zarif, and we stayed in that school. After 3 days, the newspaper started, and the news started to come up from the camp, started to emerge from the camp, and the pictures in the newspapers started to come up. Me and my sister, we have seen our parents we have seen our families in the newspaper.
Walking through the camps, I had the impression that its inhabitants were not really there. This impression lasted as I met Palestinians who were waiting. It seemed that they were in a transitory world, a sort of purgatory. They lived like the living dead. Their days and evenings would slip away without any movement above one and another, between electrical shortages, open sewers, and garbage all around. And a dream, the return home to Palestine that seems further and further away every day. It's this land, not to be able to have their feet on their land. It is the land that gives the Palestinians in Palestine their determination, their strength.
He took us to he guided us towards Belgium lawyers to establish that court against Sharon. It took a lot of media, it took a lot of a big reputation. We were about to succeed in something. Sharon was prohibited to enter Canada or Belgium, or he was scared to go to Europe. So it was a little bit scary for him. So it was good. And we already went to a lot of conferences around the world. We have made a big conference in Egypt and in Oslo, the capital of Norway. And it was quite good. We were achieving some progress. We were about to achieve a victory, but September 11th destroyed everything.
The Pan-Indian Confederacy, which defended Canada in the War of 1812, and that there's an effort to say, of Indigenous peoples to say, we've got to move beyond our local ethnic conceptions of ourselves and picture ourselves as all Indians. We all share this in common. The Arab world, the same thing. Nasser, who is the first leader in Egypt who's not a puppet, at least the first leader in several generations, who's not a puppet of the British Empire. He develops this notion of pan-Arab identity.
Deux races ont payé ce que M. Bush, l'opulence d'Aotario. Les Amérindiens et la race noire. Voilà, c'est pas un ton graphisme que je dis ça. Non, c'est une réalité. Que je suis allé là-bas, que j'ai découvert moi-même et l'Akhiri. Pour mieux comprendre. C'est ça qui me fait comprendre ce qui nous arrive, nous.
معارضة لمين؟ معارضة ضد الاحتلال، معارضة ضد الجدار، معارضة شو المعنى؟ المعارضة
الرفض. احنا بنرفض هذا الشيء. احنا رافضين معنى الاحتلال. مش بس الجدار، هذا الجدار شغله يعني فرع. احنا رافضين الاحتلال كله. لم نركع ما دام فينا طفل يرفع تكبير.
كيف المظاهرة؟ كيف المظاهرة؟ في نتائج وما في نتائج؟
في نتائج إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله. ما دام عزيمة الله معانا في نتائج. أنت صوري ومعنا.
المظاهرة ما بتكفي تصير فقط في فلسطين، احنا بدنا جميع الدول العربية تخرج مظاهرات، مش بس فلسطين مثلا في الزاوية او في سلفين، بدنا القمع في الدول العربية بطل مشان الناس تقدر تاخذ الحرية، احنا الديمقراطية قاعدين عاملينها بس اسم، مش مطبقينها، بدنا الديمقراطية تتطبق.
يا بوش يا حاكر
يا بوش يا
حاكر نفذ قرار الترحيل نفذ قرار الترحيل يا شارونو يا خنزير يا شارونو يا خنزير نفذ قرار الترحيل نفذ قرار الترحيل.
What have we, Arabs and the Arabic-speaking world, while proclaiming solidarity and unity to everyone, what have we really done to help the Palestinians? Our governments and our ruling classes have from the beginning played a double role with the Palestinian issue. This is why a young 18-year-old Palestinian girl who wanted to become a journalist chose to explode herself in Jerusalem, leaving behind a tape in which she accused the Arab leaders of watching without doing anything while women are resisting. Israel doesn't just serve as a warden for the United States' interest in the oil region, the Middle East as we call it. Israel is also the perfect excuse to deflect attention in the Arab world from corruption, the gap between the rich and the poor, the stifling limits on personal freedom and expression, and on and on. In contrast with the United States government, which openly pays Israel to the tune of $10 million per day to help take care of their interests in the region. The Arab governments forbid entry in their countries to any passport stamped with an Israeli visa under the pretense of solidarity with the Palestinian cause. But behind the scenes, it is the same thing that unites their ruling classes to those of Israel and America: money, power, and the survival of their regimes. That's it.
Alors c'est ça, c'est une évolution qui est en train de se faire. Moi je pense qu'elle est en train de se faire. À un moment donné, on n'acceptera pas d'avoir des chefs d'État médiocres. Ils sont là pour servir leurs intérêts, qui mettent à genoux leur peuple. Voilà. C'est un jour il va falloir qu'on balaye devant nous. Et on dit qu'à ce moment-là, ils ne resteront pas chez nous. Les Yéhoudis, ils accepteront. Je suis prêt à les reprendre. J'ai vécu avec les Juifs, ce n'est pas les Juifs mon problème. Le sionisme est une création européenne. C'est une création. C'est les Juifs occidentaux, c'est Herzl, etc., qui ont conçu Kikda et l'Akhiri. C'est ceux-là encore qui ont donné naissance à Israël que nous connaissons maintenant. Alors que les séfarades qui viennent de chez nous et l'Akhiri, c'est aussi un peu... Ils vivent une situation de dominés, hein, etc. Mais c'est vrai, Israël, pour en somme, régler un problème de toute une région, la région arabe et l'Akhiri, eh bien, il n'acceptera jamais qu'un chef d'État vienne et serve les seuls intérêts de son peuple. C'est le problème. Mais ça ne va pas durer. Un jour, tout ce monde-là n'acceptera plus cela. Et on dit que ça. Et ce sera une autre phase. Peut-être que ce ne sera pas la dernière, mais c'est vers cela qu'il nous faut. Nous vivons une situation de colonisé qui ne dit pas son nom.
ابعد ايوه يا خبر الشباب
We need a new vision of the world, one in which each and every one of us can find one's right place.
شوفي venez par là. Ça, c'est les chiffres d'affaires t'as les sociétés, les grandes sociétés, non, comme General Motors, chauffe. C'est $1 milliard. General Motors, voilà son avoir, 132 milliards de $4. Chauffe l'Égypte, 33,5. 4 fois. Une société, chauffe Exxon, c'est 115 milliards. C'est-à-dire qu'elle est 4 fois l'Égypte. شو نيجيريا اللي فيها 29 milliards par rapport à Exxon, par rapport à Ford, par rapport à Toyota, par rapport à Dodge, par rapport à Unilever. هذا هو البوفوار malheureusement comme il existe actuellement. Le capitalisme, c'est ça. C'est ceux-là qui font les décisions.
حبة الماما حبة لي خي الصغير حبة الماما حبة البابا حبة لي خي الصغير يا أمورة خذي حبة وحبتين يا أمورة خذي حبة وحبتين حبة لخيك الصغير حبة الماما حبة البابا حبة لخيك الصغير زيدي كمان حبة الحيفا زيدي كمان حبة الغزة حبة عمك الخليل زيدي كمان حبة العنكة لبيت الشالا والجليل حبة لعمك الخليل كمان اعطيني الله يخليكي غصني الصغير الصغير كمان اعطيني الله يخليكي غصني الصغير الصغير يزين الشعر الحرير واحطها في حضني طول الليل يزينها الشعر الحرير واحطها في حضني طول الليل غصني غالي هل تدري شذوري امتدت في الأرض في كل أرض فلسطين غصني غالي هل تدري شذوري امتدت في الأرض في كل أرض فلسطين لكن ما دمت يا